Hey, my name is Dave Rogers, and we're coming to you again today from the David J. Rogers Fine Art Gallery in Morro Bay, California. And today I'm going to show you a peek behind the scenes from one of our watercolor mastery workshops titled Weathered Country Barn. And we're going to tackle something that a lot of artists find a little bit tricky, which is adding buildings to landscapes that actually look natural. So if you're ready, here is our clip from that workshop. So there's a lot of benefits to adding buildings to your paintings, and the primary challenge though with adding a building to a watercolor landscape is to get that depth, to be able to add the dimension to the painting, because most all of the photographs, if you're doing it if you're creating a painting from a photograph, or even if you're painting plein air, if you're painting a barn or something and you're painting plein air, the biggest challenge is getting the shadow right, because 9 times out of 10 you don't have that strong shadow that you need in order to really emphasize the shape and the structure. And you've got to change that. You've got to be able to look at the building and say to yourself, okay, what is the most interesting characteristics of this shape, and either adjust it or be able to decide, okay, what would be the best shadow side to emphasize this particular shape. And I'm going to show you that with a couple of reference photos. I'm just going to go to another screen here. So this is actually the reference photo that I used to do our project painting from. This is our project painting, and you can see if you look at those two, there's quite a bit of difference there. I mean, especially with the shadow. If you look at the image on the left, it's quite a bit different than the one on the right. And what I've done is I've actually picked what I thought was the most interesting parts of the building and adjusted it to fit my painting. When you're painting a structure, you look at it and you think to yourself, okay, well, what's the most interesting shape? Okay, what's a more interesting shape for this building, and what are the characteristics of this building that I want to portray in my painting to give it more character? Okay, so you can see that little lean-to on the right-hand side. I just kind of eliminated that because I didn't think that really added much to the composition, and I really wanted to emphasize the height of the building as opposed to the length of the building. So you can see I shortened it up quite a bit, and removing that little lean-to on the right has actually helped to emphasize the height of the building also, because now it's really looks quite a bit taller in the painting than it does on the photograph, because it doesn't have that. But I also added the shadow on the right-hand side. In fact, I was looking through some of the other reference photographs of barns, and I'll kind of show you a few of the ones that I found. If you look at all of these different reference photos that I found, none of these references have that strong shadow that you really need to emphasize the shape of the building. When you're painting a structure like this, the shadow, if you paint the shadow first, the shadow by itself should give you the entire form of what that structure is going to be by just adding the shadow. Okay, so you look at these structures and you think to yourself, okay, if I were to add, if I had a light source either on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of these buildings, how would that shadow fall, and how would it best describe the shape of that building? And you can see in the bottom, again, in the bottom left-hand side, that image is the one that we used, and the shadow is really designed, is put there by design to really emphasize the shape of the building. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to paint under this eave here first. Just come straight across, just like that. Now I'm going to just paint this entire shape. I'm going to paint right over the windows, right over the doors. I'm not trying to avoid anything. If you run out of pigment on your brush, just load it back up again. Now you notice that I'm painting from top to bottom. Okay, this is part of the reason why we want a slanted board, okay? You use that slant to your advantage because you see this edge of paint here? This is called your working edge. And gravity is pulling that paint toward you. And this is called a flat wash of color. And we're using gravity to our advantage to help pull that paint towards us, and it's going to help us to have a really nice, even wash of color. There's another little shadow here under that eave, okay? I'm looking at my painting here and I'm thinking to myself, okay, where are all those shadows at? There's a big shadow that comes across the back of the building from a tree, and we can just paint that in right now. Kind of flows down this way. There's no rhyme or reason to this shape. It can just be a bunch of brush strokes that come down across the building. Just like that. Now down here at the bottom, you can see that that shadow goes out here into the front of the building. And we want to have that because, and we want it to be all in the same wash. And the reason for that is because that's really going to help connect that building to the painting. Okay, it's going to anchor that building right to the painting by putting a shadow underneath it. You might have to negatively paint some of that grass if the grass kind of goes up into your shadow. I'm looking at my painting. I can see there's another little shadow here on this little smokestack. So I'm going to paint that. And it just kind of falls across the building, just like that. I can see here that there's a little shadow behind this wagon wheel. So I'm going to very carefully just kind of paint what I think that shadow would look like as it falls across. Same direction. Everything is coming from the same direction. The light source is over here on the upper left-hand side. So all these shadows will be falling from left to right. A little window shadow there, a little door shadow there, a little shadow on the side of this barrel. Now you can see that just with the shadow by itself, we haven't painted any other part of the barn. We haven't done any of the details in the wood. We haven't painted any of these doors, any of these windows, any of this rust, any of these details at all, okay? All we've done is the shadow of the barn, but just with the shadow by itself, you can see exactly what it is in 3 dimensions. That's what we want. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope it gave you some ideas on how to add structures like barns and buildings and sheds and things like that to your own landscapes and making them a little bit more convincing. If you enjoyed this quick video and you want to dive deeper into some of these techniques, you can find a link to the full Watercolor Mastery Workshop Weathered Country Barn in the description below. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe. I've got a lot more watercolor tips and demonstrations coming your way. Take care, and we'll see you next time.